This is Eddie Hearn, Matchroom Boxing. You are watching Sporting Icons. You don't need to be anywhere else.
Okay, so following the resume breakdown of Deontay Wilder, that of course I've done last time out, a lot of you have asked me to do the same thing with Anthony Joshua. Whereas in the Deontay Wilder video, I went through, of course, his amateur career and every single fight as a heavyweight, as a professional. So many of you have asked me to do the same thing with Anthony Joshua, Tyson Fury, Dillian Whyte, and so forth, so forth. So on this one, we're going to do Anthony Joshua. Now, to start off with, we're not going to far too stray from the Deontay Wilder video because we're going to talk about the amateur here, where Wilder, he had 35 fights as an amateur, 30 wins, 5 defeats. Joshua only had 8 fights more at 43 fights, 40 wins and 3 defeats. Both of these guys took on boxing at a very late age compared to most. Wilder, he first put on a pair of box gloves at age 19. Joshua done the same at age 18. So very, very similar as an amateur. Very, very similar. In fact, both of these guys, of course, represented their countries at the Olympic Games. Wilder in 2008 got the bronze medal at heavyweight, which of course is the equivalent to cruiserweight. Joshua got the gold in 2012 at super heavyweight. So again, very, very similar. There's a lot to draw comparisons when it comes to Wilder and Joshua. Now, sticking with just Anthony Joshua, as I said before, Joshua, his amateur record is 40 wins and 3 defeats. Those 3 defeats are Majidov in 2012 at the World Championship final, where Joshua lost on points to Majidov. In fact, Majidov last time out as a professional actually snapped his ankle. Nasty, absolutely nasty. Anyway, Majidov, he's got a victory over Anthony Joshua. Of course, the other one is Mihail Nista from Romania, where he stopped Anthony Joshua in the European Championships. Anthony Joshua's other loss, of course, come to Dillian Whyte, where Dillian Whyte beat him on points, but of course dropped Anthony Joshua in that fight. In fact, that was Dillian Whyte's amateur debut. Dillian Whyte only had 7 amateur fights in total, but his debut was against Anthony Joshua. Dillian wasn't supposed to win that one. Of course, he did. So either way, Joshua, with an amateur record of 40 wins and 3 defeats, very, very impressive, especially when you put on the amount of things that he's done. Of course, getting to the 2011 World Championship final. It was a feat in itself, considering the amount of fights that of course he's had, and of course he defeated Roberto Camarelli on the way as well. Of course, he won the England National Championship in 2012, and of course in 2011. In fact, in 2010 as well, he got the Great Britain Championships. He got the International Championship as well, where he defeated Otto Wallin as well. But of course, the biggest one will be 2012 in London. The Olympic Games, gets the super heavyweight gold medal. Now, I know a lot of people feel that, well, some people feel that he shouldn't have even got to the final anyway, that he got the rub of the green. Many people say that he only really defeated the 2008 silver medalist in Zili Zhang. That's probably his only real win along the way. That's what a lot of people are saying. That's not what I'm saying. That's what a lot of people are saying. And in the final, he got the rub of the home green when he defeated Roberto Camarelli, or at least got the decision. Roberto Camarelli, of course, is 2008 Olympic gold medalist as well. Either way, officially, Anthony Joshua is a 2012 Olympic gold medalist. So, of course, like most, the decision to turn pro was pretty imminent. In fact, he'd done that 1 year later when he signed with Matchroom, and for his professional debut, he took on Emmanuel Leo. Emmanuel Leo, 8-0. Now, much like I said with Deontay Wilder, you always have to expect with all fighters, it doesn't really matter what their amateur background is, or at least most fighters. Of course, there are exceptions to the rule, like Lomachenko and that, who just go straight in at the deep end, but you do have to expect for at least the first 10 to 15 fights to be padded. It's the transition into the professional game, okay? So, of course, we have to give Wilder a pass for that. We're going to have to with Anthony Joshua as well. But I think when you look at it side by side, you'll agree that Joshua, for the first 15 fights or so, Joshua had much stiffer competition than Deontay Wilder did. But I think my big criticism of Deontay Wilder, for him padding out his resume, he was padding it out for the first 32 fights. In fact, in his 32nd fight, he was still fighting journeyman and Jason Gavin. Okay, that's one criticism. Either way, back on to Anthony Joshua. So, Emmanuel Leo, 8-0, 3 by knockout. That was his professional debut. Knocked him out in round number 1. Now, Emmanuel Leo has not had a fight since. So much like with many of Deontay Wilder's opponents in the first parts, many of these guys who took on Wilder never fought again. And it's going to be exactly the same with Anthony Joshua. Emmanuel Leo has not had a fight since. In his second professional fight, he took on Paul Butlin. Now, Paul Butlin, he gets stopped in 2 rounds. He's had a few fights since then. Of course, he's lost a couple of those. And I think he's only won like 2 of them or something. But either way, Anthony Joshua stops him quite comfortably in 2 rounds. Of course, Paul Butlin, a journeyman. His third professional fight, I'm not even going to try and pronounce his first name, but he takes on Kisiek. Maybe I haven't killed that surname, I don't know. With a record of 5 wins and 6 defeats. Joshua stops him in 2 rounds. In fact, since then, Kisiek has literally become a journeyman. He has racked up a few wins, by the way, about 5 or 6 wins since then. Of course, has lost about 15 along the way as well. So he certainly did turn into a journeyman. Then Dorian Darch. Dorian Darch, at the time, I remember a lot of people saying that Dorian Darch has the potential to go on and maybe win a British title or something. But I think that Dorian Darch, he decided to turn into a journeyman, like many fighters do. Why? Because you can fight more regularly. Of course, you earn probably more money than those who are taking the sport far more serious, which is why a lot of journeymen do it. Dorian Darch is, of course, of that ilk right now. But Dorian Darch at the time, 7 wins and 2 defeats. His current resume, by the way, for Dorian Darch is 12 wins and 12 losses. One day he's retired, the next day he's not. I don't know what's happening with Dorian Darch. Joshua takes him out in 2 rounds. Then he takes on Hector Alfredo Avila. Certainly a journeyman with 22 wins and 15 defeats. Now, ordinarily, it's like the other way around. The journeyman will usually have more losses than they have wins. But with Avila, no. Okay, in fact, Avila only had a couple of fights since then. I don't know if he's retired or not. But either way, Joshua stops him in round number 1. So as you can see, he's certainly padding out his resume, as all fighters do. Then he takes on Matt Legg. Now, Matt Legg, 7 wins and 2 defeats. This was Matt Legg's final fight, where a lot of people, again, people are talking about that maybe Matt Legg can at least ask some questions of Anthony Joshua. Because people just weren't landing punches on Anthony Joshua up to that point. Maybe Matt Legg could do that. Nope, Anthony Joshua takes him out in round number 1. As I said, that was Matt Legg's final fight. Then he takes on Matt Skelton. Now, again, that was Matt Skelton's final fight as well, when Anthony Joshua stopped him in 2 rounds. But Matt Skelton, 28 wins and 8 defeats. Again, another guy who's supposed to have tested Anthony Joshua. He's supposed to land at least a couple of shots on Joshua, just so we know whether or not Joshua has a kind of chin. Because a lot of people are saying that he could be the next Lennox Lewis. A lot of people saying he could be the next Frank Bruno. In other words, not great around the whiskers. Which for me, I thought was pretty disrespectful. I always liked the Frank Bruno. But anyway, Matt Skelton was supposed to ask these questions. In fact, I remember a lot of people saying, when's Joshua going to step up? Even at this point, which is very early, very unheard of. Not really the done thing. But there seems to be a bit of a trend as well, especially here in the UK, that we're saying, when are you going to step up? When are you going to step up? And we're asking these questions very, very early. We're very impatient. We're not allowing fighters to build up a bit of a resume, get the experience. We're trying to push him in there. When's Joshua going to fight for a world title? And I think a lot of it is because he was a 2012 Olympic gold medalist. But either way, against Matt Skelton, he stops him in 2 rounds. As I said, that was Matt Skelton's final fight. Konstantin Aric, 21 wins and 9 defeats. Now, they are journeymen. I know journeymen, as I said before, it's usually the other way around. They have far more defeats than they do wins. But Joshua's doing it complete opposite. But they are still kind of journeymen. But in fact, he stops Aric in 3 rounds. So this is the first time Joshua has actually got into the 3rd round. Then he takes on Denis Bakhtov. 38 wins and 9 defeats. Is he a journeyman? Yes, of course he's a journeyman. In fact, Bakhtov, he's had about 10 fights since then. Lost 8 or 9 of them, only won 1 of them, but Anthony Joshua takes him out in 2 rounds. And this was for the vacant WBC International title as well. Then he takes on Michael Sprott, 42 wins and 22 defeats. So as you can see already, if we're comparing what Wilder's opponents, complete opposite. They have far more losses than they do wins, that kind of thing. But Joshua is still taking on journeyman. You can't say that Michael Sprott is not a journeyman. You can't. 42 wins. Yes, it's a lot of wins, but he's got a lot of losses as well. In fact, for Michael Sprott, he only had about 5 or 6 fights after that, and Julia lost the rest of them. Joshua stops him in round number 1. Sprott was supposed to test him. Didn't quite work out that way. Then he takes on Jason Gavin. Of course, Jason Gavin, former opponent for Deontay Wilder. where Deontay Wilder took on Jason Gavin on the fight before he got his world title shot. So if it's good enough for Wilder, good enough for Joshua. Took Wilder, was it 4 or 5 rounds to get rid of Jason Gavin? Took Joshua 3. Then takes on Rafael Zambano Love, Brazilian fighter, 36 wins and 10 defeats. Joshua takes him out in 2 rounds. In fact, since then, Zambano Love has racked up quite a few losses since that moment. But now Joshua is starting to take on much stiffer competition, starting off with Kevin Johnson. Now, for those of you who are new into boxing now, you may have heard of Kevin Johnson. Of course, he pretty much loses every fight that he has now. But at one time, Kevin Johnson was actually a world title challenger. In fact, he took on Klitschko for the world heavyweight title. With Vitaly Klitschko, wasn't it? And Kevin Johnson, he's been in there with many, many opponents. In fact, Joshua was only one of maybe one. In fact, he may have actually been the first, if not maybe the second fighter to have ever stopped Kevin Johnson. In fact, he's done it in 2 rounds. In fact, Kevin Johnson since then, of course, gone the distance with quite a few fighters, including Daniel Dubois. But Joshua, he makes short work of it. Then he takes on 21-0 undefeated fighter from UK, Gary Cornish. Now, this was for the vacant Commonwealth heavyweight title. Now, Gary Cornish, a lot of people felt that he was going to go on to become maybe British champion. Of course, he's from Scotland, but become British champion at some point. So him fighting Joshua is almost like a bit of a crossroads for both of them in some ways. Of course, Gary Cornish did actually get an opportunity to fight for the British heavyweight title a little while after this fight, where who was it that he fought? It was a guy from Norwich. Forgot his name. Hughie Fury beat that guy for the British title. Anyway, so Gary Cornish, well, he didn't last too long. Anthony Joshua got him out there pretty quick work. But Joshua doesn't just stop there with an undefeated fighter like Gary Cornish, that he takes on another undefeated fighter, 16-0, Dillian the Body Snatcher Whyte. Of course, Dillian Whyte is the current WBC interim world heavyweight champion. And of course, this was a rematch from the amateurs. As I said in the beginning of the video, Dillian Whyte beat Anthony Joshua, one of only 3 people to beat Anthony Joshua as an amateur, when Dillian Whyte done it on his amateur debut. Dillian Whyte was 16-0, Anthony Joshua 15-0 as a professional. Well, very good fight. In fact, I said this to Dillian quite a few times that, I don't want to say that he made Anthony Joshua a pay-per-view fighter, not at all, because Joshua was always going to be a pay-per-view fighter. But I think Dillian Whyte put Joshua on the pay-per-view model earlier than people planned, because Dillian sold the hell out of the fight, the way that he was going at Joshua. And for the first time, we're actually seeing Joshua get riled up. Joshua was biting back. Joshua was arguing back with Dillian Whyte. So this fight pretty much pushed Anthony Joshua onto the pay-per-view platform, and Joshua has not been off the pay-per-view platform ever since. This was a grudge match. Was it called Bad Blood? I think it was called. But Anthony Joshua, of course, he gets to win by a 7th round knockout. But Dillian Whyte certainly gave him a scare. In fact, this was for the vacant British heavyweight title, along with Joshua's WBC International and Joshua's Commonwealth as well. But in round number 1, Joshua, of course, I thought that he was about to get Dillian Whyte out of there. I thought that this fight was going to have some legs in it, was actually going to go quite a few rounds, maybe even the distance. But the way that Joshua came out at Dillian Whyte, I thought that he was actually going to end Dillian Whyte in the first round, the way it was going. And thankfully for Dillian, he did actually get to the end of the round. But at the end of that round, even after the bell went, the referee and the personnel all had to separate them, because Dillian Whyte was still going for Joshua after Joshua hit him after the bell. So the fight was nearly stopped in that moment. But anyway, round number 2 is the moment that a lot of people had been asking for. Can Anthony Joshua take a punch? Well, Dillian Whyte, very, very famous for it now. That big left hook landed on Anthony Joshua. Joshua's legs, his feet turned to concrete. You could see in that instant, he had smoke in his boots. Joshua was in a whole world of trouble. Now, I know Joshua said after the fight, no, I wasn't. I knew what was going on. I was fine. He wasn't fine. You could see that he wasn't. Even Eddie Hearn, he was struggling to speak after that fight. For the first time where Anthony Joshua has had a fight, Eddie Hearn at the end of the fight would always be hyping up Anthony Joshua. Yeah, he's this, that, and the other. He's the real deal. Very, very subdued. That moment in round number 2 scared the living hell out of Eddie Hearn. You could see it in his face. You could really see it. And I think luckily for Anthony Joshua as well, potentially luckily, I don't know, where Joshua went against the ropes, Dillian is swinging the punches. Dillian popped his shoulder in that moment. It was an injury that he carried into the fight. Now, I'm not going to say that had the shoulder not have popped, that Dillian would have won in that moment. We don't know. Okay, that's the truth of it. But either way, Joshua, you could argue he got the rub of the green in that particular moment. But it's fighting. Worse things have happened. Round number 3, Joshua is fully recovered and pretty much handles Dillian for the rest of the fight, all the way up until he stops Dillian Whyte in round number 7. Dillian's absolutely exhausted, gets caught with a big uppercut. That's all she wrote. So again, that's his second undefeated fighter in a row. His third duly follows in IBF World Heavyweight Champion Charles Martin, who of course picked up the vacant belt by defeating Klitschko. When Klitschko, he twisted his knee, I think it was, when he hit the canvas. Charles Martin picks up an easy win and becomes IBF World Champion. In his first defence, takes on Anthony Joshua. Now, it was a kind of fight out of nowhere, but of course, Joshua, even at this point, was fast becoming the heavyweight division's money man. Charles Martin recognised that. He also recognised that Joshua was still green behind the ears, a little wet behind the ears. Get hold of Joshua now. Let's not wait for him to get any better. Let's fight him now. There was vulnerabilities in the last fight, as we've seen with Dillian Whyte. Maybe I'll beat him. If not, I'm going to get paid very, very well. I walked this earth like a god, gave all the trash talk, got in the ring, gets clipped in round number 2, looks a little bit stunned by it, gets up, gets hit again in round number 2, and says, you know what? Pay me. I'm quite happy to stay here. Stand up when the referee says the count of 10 and then complain about it. But ultimately, most people know what it was that Charles Martin done. He pretty much handed over that belt because the fear of God entered him, not him walking this earth like a god. But Anthony Joshua, even then, you see, I remember people like David Hay and Lennox Lewis and quite a few other people saying that Charles Martin, maybe this fight for Anthony Joshua is too early because this was Anthony Joshua's 16th professional fight. 16th professional fight and getting a world title opportunity. This is a Charles Martin who would have been an in-house fight for Wilder, but Wilder didn't want to do it because he said, I can't, I've got mandatory obligations, even though unification trumps all, right? Anyway, he was saying how he didn't want to fight Charles Martin. Well, Anthony Joshua did, even though people were advising him, don't do it. This is a tall southpaw fighter with not much footage on him. Maybe you shouldn't fight him. It's a bit too early because if you lose, then it's not a good look. If you win, you've got that target on your back very, very early in your career. People are advising him, like Lennox Lewis and that, don't take this fight with Charles Martin. Either way, he did, knocks him out, stops him even in 2 rounds. But he doesn't just stop there with undefeated fighters. He takes on his 4th undefeated fighter in a row, Dominic Breazeale from America. Now, Anthony Joshua, he had glandular fever in that fight. I mean, that's well documented now. But with Dominic Breazeale, he was 17-0. Huge punching power. People knew that already. And people knew that he could take a punch as well. Now, regardless of Anthony Joshua having glandular fever or not, he dominated Dominic Breazeale and ultimately stopped him in 7 rounds. But a lot of people were picking Dominic Breazeale to beat Anthony Joshua because of Dominic Breazeale's durability and his big punching power, where people felt that it was only a matter of time before Dominic Breazeale lands a big punch on Joshua and he's going to go. And I remember quite a few people talking about that. Don't get me wrong, Joshua, of course, was the favourite going into that fight, but he handled Dominic Breazeale, glandular fever or not, he handled him, got him out there in 7 rounds. Now, I know a lot of Wilder fans say that it shows that Wilder is better than Joshua because Wilder got Breazeale out of there in round number 1, took Joshua 7 rounds. But of course, when you throw back that Joshua got rid of Eric Molina and Jason Gavin quicker than Wilder, they do tend to go a little bit quiet. Hey, what can you do? Either way, that was a very good win for Anthony Joshua at that time. But again, much like Dillian Whyte, Charles Martin and Dominic Breazeale, all 3 of these are ranked in the top 15 through quite a few sanctioning bodies. Dominic Breazeale, of course, has had another world title opportunity against Wilder. Dillian Whyte's been the number 1 WBC for the longest time. Of course, he's the WBC interim world heavyweight champion and that as well. So already you can see Joshua, at only 17 fights in, got a pretty damn good resume already, hasn't he? Even with just those 3 names. But either way, he continues, takes on Eric Molina. Eric Molina, again, former world heavyweight title challenger, where he fought Deontay Wilder. He gets stopped by Deontay Wilder in 9 rounds after stunning Wilder in an earlier round, had Wilder all over the place on Bambi legs. But either way, Eric Molina's up next for Joshua. But I'll tell you what now, it wasn't supposed to have been Eric Molina. Was not supposed to have been that fight. It was supposed to have been Klitschko. Klitschko had all agreed to fight Anthony Joshua. Anthony Joshua agreed and everything like that. Then Klitschko, he hurt himself in training before the fight was officially announced. Joshua tried to get a hold of Kubrat Pulev, the European heavyweight champion. He didn't want Anthony Joshua at that point. That's why Eric Molina was brought in. I think most people knew that Anthony Joshua was just going to mow through Eric Molina, which of course he did in 3 rounds. But for me, I think most people will remember that particular fight card for the Dillian Whyte versus Derek Chisora, part 1. That fight stole the show. But of course, when Anthony Joshua defeated Eric Molina, of course he got the headlines because Wladimir Klitschko entered the ring to announce their fight for next. Of course, it would be for unification. Anthony Joshua's IBF World Heavyweight title, plus the vacant WBA and vacant IBO World Heavyweight titles. Wladimir Klitschko at that time, 64 wins and 4 defeats. In fact, he lost his last fight on points to Tyson Fury, which that fight was much closer than people will admit. People say that was a one-sided, easy win for Tyson Fury. It was closer than people giving credit for. But for sure, Tyson Fury won that fight. Absolutely, I was very, very proud of Tyson Fury. But of course, this was, 16, 17 months, maybe even 18 months out the ring, Wladimir Klitschko. That's fair to say. But as I said before, Wladimir Klitschko was supposed to have got in the ring with Anthony Joshua much earlier than what he'd done. 6 months earlier, even. So, with Wladimir Klitschko, as we know, he's always in and out of the gym. So it's not like Wladimir Klitschko, he took that loss with Tyson Fury and hadn't trained. In fact, he was all set up to have the rematch with Tyson Fury, which of course fell through. Then they rescheduled the rematch. Again, fell through for that. Then he was meant to take on Anthony Joshua. Then Klitschko got injured himself. So Klitschko actually had 3 training camps within that period. So this was a very, very fit Wladimir Klitschko. And the way that Klitschko came out, a lot of people have said that had he fought that way with Tyson Fury, he'd have probably beaten Tyson Fury. I disagree with that myself, but either way, a lot of people do feel that. But it was a hell of a fight. A lot of people go down to say that the unification fight, again, this is Anthony Joshua's 19th professional fight. Tyson Fury defeated Wladimir Klitschko in his 25th fight. So this is 6 fights difference. So again, I think people have to remember that as well. In fact, Joshua, even right now, even after everything that he's done since the Klitschko fight, he's on 25 fights now. At this point of Tyson Fury's professional career, he's now just taken on Wladimir Klitschko. So again, that's something to look at. Either way, that was a hell of a fight, that's for sure. As I said, it was a unification fight where a lot of people saying Joshua should not be taken on Klitschko. Klitschko is far too experienced. He's far too good. His resume will tell you he is the elite of the elite. Did he have a bad night at the office with Tyson Fury? Or maybe Tyson Fury is just so much better than people give him credit for. Either way, Joshua should not be taking this fight. And I think it shocked a lot of people where Klitschko got dropped in round number 5 for the first time in, was it 11 or 12 years, I think it was, to Wladimir Klitschko actually hit the deck. So that was a bit of a shock. That was a camera snap moment just to see Klitschko on the deck with Anthony Joshua stood over him. So no matter what happened, well, at least Joshua can say, well, you know what, I dropped a Hall of Famer, a future Hall of Famer in Wladimir Klitschko. But then in round number 6, Wladimir Klitschko turns all around. Drops Anthony Joshua with the one punch that Anthony Joshua should have seen coming. Because what's the one punch that Wladimir Klitschko does? Outside the big left hook. The straight right, straight down the pipe, right on the forehead of Anthony Joshua. Quite clearly, it sends a shock waves down to the boots of Anthony Joshua. Joshua goes down. Didn't really look hurt. In fact, he was sticking his tongue out. Well, like some people feel that he made a bit of a meal of that. I don't think so. I think that that was a genuine shot. And Anthony Joshua is in trouble for the rest of the fight. He's breathing heavy. He's trying to find new ways of breathing through his ears, through his arse, whatever. Because Klitschko is just pinging away at him. But of course, Klitschko, because he'd been dropped in round number 5, seemed a little bit apprehensive about engaging in case Anthony Joshua was playing possum or Joshua just pulled out another punch and dropped him. I think it scared the life out of Klitschko, to be honest with you. But then, of course, in round number 11, Anthony Joshua drops Wladimir Klitschko twice in round number 11. Of course, most people will remember that uppercut from the depths of hell, followed by the left hook, which sent Wladimir Klitschko crashed to the canvas. And of course, he gets dropped again and ultimately stopped on the ropes. Anthony Joshua becomes a unified heavyweight world champion in only 19 professional fights. I don't know why people hate on this man. I have absolutely no idea. But we ain't finished. He has his first defense of his unified titles against Kalish Takam. Now, Kalish Takam was not supposed to have been the opponent, as we know. It's supposed to have been Kubrat Pulev. He was the IBF mandatory. Now, I know a lot of people saying that he should have fought Luis Ortiz, who, of course, was the WBA mandatory for Anthony Joshua. But because he had the IBF belt before he got the WBA, he already had a mandatory in Kubrat Pulev. That's why the IBF was next. Then it was going to be Luis Ortiz. Luis Ortiz didn't want to wait around for one more fight when tried to fight Deontay Wilder. Of course, he failed the PED test, which is why that fight didn't happen straight away. But Kalish Takam replaces Kubrat Pulev because Pulev, he tore a bicep or a tricep or something like that, or his shoulder muscle. Kalish Takam was the next in line for the IBF. That's why he took on Kalish Takam. Kalish Takam, we knew, was a very, very tough guy. In fact, previous to that fight, the two biggest names that he fought and lost to was Joseph Parker, who was undefeated at the time. And, of course, he got stopped by Oleksandr Povetkin, again, one of the greats of this particular modern era. Kalish Takam, of course, was giving Joshua all kinds of problems, including a headbutt right on the nose where potentially he broke Anthony Joshua's nose. But the referee stopped the fight in round number 10 prematurely. I would say so. Even Anthony Joshua said that he didn't want the referee to stop the fight. He wanted to give the fans what they wanted, which was a brutal stoppage. Or, if not, at least allow Kalish Takam the opportunity to go the distance. Okay, so either way, I think that the referee spoiled the end of that fight. But either way, Takam, very good opponent, that's for sure. Then he unifies again against undefeated New Zealand fighter Joseph Parker, 24-0. Again, Joseph Parker had quite some good wins on his resume. Hughie Fury, Kalish Takam, and of course quite a few other ones. So him taking on Anthony Joshua, this is a guy that a lot of people felt that Joseph Parker could actually beat Anthony Joshua. Even me, I was doubting whether or not Joshua was going to get the win over this one. Of course, I wanted him to beat Parker. As much as I like Joseph Parker, I've always been a fan of his quite some time. But of course, Joshua, he's my fellow Brit, isn't he? So of course, I'm going to want Joshua to win. And it's a unification as well. The referee spoiled this fight. That would be fair to say. Had the referee not spoiled this fight, maybe Joshua would have got him out of there. Maybe Joseph Parker would have got Joshua out of there. We don't know. For me, the referee spoiled the fight. Joshua goes the distance for the first time in his career, all 12 rounds. Of course, gets a unanimous decision. Most people would agree with the decision on that one, by the way, but the referee certainly spoiled that fight. So Joshua, already in only 21 professional fights, has unified twice. So at this point, he's now got all the belts other than the WBC. But he's not happy there. He wants to go fight Wilder. Wilder makes every excuse in the book to not fight him. Turns down record high paydays at the time for Wilder. Wilder doesn't want nothing to do with it. In fact, even puts in a fake $50 million offer, which Frank Warren confirmed that it was fake because the money was coming from BT Sport, a platform that Joshua cannot fight on. So basically, Wilder was just using Anthony Joshua's name for clout. That would be fair to say. So Oleksandr Povetkin is up next. Oleksandr Povetkin, 34 wins and 1 defeat. Again, an outstanding resume for Oleksandr Povetkin. His only defeat was, of course, to Wladimir Klitschko, where he did get ragdolled all over the ring. Let's have it right. Arguably, Klitschko should have got disqualified in that fight. But that's his only defeat, was against Wladimir Klitschko. Povetkin, of course, recently had defeated David Price the fight before. And again, very, very good resume, taking on some of the best Europeans that are out there and defeating them. Anthony Joshua ends him in 7 rounds. Now, people criticise the fact that Anthony Joshua defeated Povetkin. Oh, Povetkin's no good. Povetkin says that and the other. But they weren't saying it before Povetkin signed to fight Anthony Joshua, even though Povetkin was the WBA mandatory. So Joshua had no choice anyway, other than to fight Povetkin. If he didn't, he'd have got stripped. But yeah, they want to praise Deontay Wilder for fighting Luis Ortiz. He's actually older than Povetkin and not even anywhere near as achieved as Povetkin. Povetkin, of course, is former WBA World Heavyweight Champion. Joshua, first couple of rounds, arguably first 3 rounds, he's in trouble with Povetkin, isn't he? But ultimately, as it turns out, Joshua had flu on that night, but ultimately got Povetkin out of there in 7 rounds. Next fight was supposed to have been against Wilder. Again, Wilder turned down multi-millions to fight him. Tyson Fury turned down a 40% offer to fight him. Again, at this point, Tyson Fury was not the world champion. Big Baby Jarrell Miller, he got offered to fight, accepted it, 7 million. Of course, failed for PEDs. Dillian Whyte got offered the fight as well to be held in London, but it was far less money than what anybody else was after or was offered. And Dillian Whyte knew that, and just out of common courtesy, said, I ain't fighting you for less money than what you're offering everybody else, when I've got a bigger profile than everybody else I tell you you're offering the fight to, such as Big Baby Jarrah Miller, which is why the Andy Ruiz Jr. fight came about. Andy Ruiz Jr., of course, gets dropped in round number 3. Joshua rushes him and gets clipped himself. Joshua also hits the deck in round number 3. Did Joshua overlook Ruiz? Of course he did. You could see that. And in fact, his mannerisms in the ring walk and as the Master of Ceremonies is introducing Joshua, you could see Joshua just wasn't really all there. You could see he wasn't. But either way, people did feel that Joshua was going to get the win anyway, even though Andy Ruiz Jr. had only lost once before to Joseph Parker for the vacant WBO World Heavyweight title, where he lost on points. Many people do feel that Andy Ruiz Jr. won that fight. Regardless, Joshua's in all kinds of trouble. People like to use the word equilibrium. His equilibrium was off. I mean, I'd never heard this saying before boxing, okay? But Joshua's equilibrium was all off. And of course, was getting beat up every time a huge shot was land on Joshua, because Joshua's legs just weren't there anymore. He couldn't focus. He couldn't think in that anymore. He didn't know what was going on. Of course, ended up getting stopped in round number 7 with the referee calling a halt to the proceeding, which of course I agree with, by the way. I do agree with. But either way, Joshua gets him back in the rematch in Saudi Arabia in a one-sided boxing display. Again, Joshua, he gets criticism for his display in that rematch. Oh, he ran away. But yeah, that's pretty much the way that Muhammad Ali fought. That's exactly the same way that Tyson Fury fights most of his fights. But they're considered masterful boxers. Joshua does it. He's a coward. Either way, he wins back his unified heavyweight world titles. Then, of course, more recently, after a little bit of time out of the ring due to pandemic, takes on Kubrat Pulev. 28 wins and 1 defeat. 1 defeat to Wladimir Klitschko, of course, where he got stopped. And Anthony Joshua stops him in 9 rounds. Again, very, very one-sided fight, where Joshua, he's mixing his brutal power punches with the uppercuts, and he's also showing his boxing skill as well. So now you can see Joshua starting to mix it all up now. He's not just one or the other, he's really starting to mix it up. And that's what he's done with Kubrat Pulev, where, again, Kubrat Pulev was game, was he not? He was really game. He took some massive, massive shots. But again, Pulev is a name that is going to be remembered. That's for sure. In fact, I would pick a Kubrat Pulev, Andy Ruiz Jr., a Oleksandr Povetkin, a Joseph Parker, a Wladimir Klitschko, a Dillian Whyte, and maybe 1 or 2 others to actually beat, say, a Luis Ortiz. I really would. Now, I'm not trying to blow smoke up Anthony Joshua's resume, not at all. But I think anybody who can argue with his resume, you're really hating. You're really, really hating. Of course, his next fight will be against Oleksandr Usyk on the 25th of September at the Tottenham Hotspur Football Stadium. Of course, we're still waiting for official confirmation, as of me recording this video, has not come yet. Again, that'll be another quality fighter on his resume if, of course, he gets past Oleksandr Usyk. So that is Anthony Joshua's resume. 24 wins, 1 defeat as a professional, 40 wins and 3 defeats as an amateur. Not bad at all, is it? Olympic gold medalist, Commonwealth champion, British champion, skipped the European, unified heavyweight world champion with a very, very good resume. All in 25 fights. Drop your thoughts below, click thumbs up, subscribe, and I'll catch you all in the next video.